time to bring up that question, I'm sure Matt can explain.
Okay.
I can certainly cover that topic as I go through the monthly financial report.
Okay, are we on? Oh, okay, you let me know when we're on. Now, because we can't see the other members here. Can we take that off the screen until we, so the other people up there, so we can introduce the people who are there?
Maybe Teresa can.
Okay, good afternoon. Because of lack of a voting quorum, we're going to hold this meeting as a workshop meeting today. What I'd first like to do is have everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America. Under God, indivisible, justice for all. Before we go to the budget presentation questions, I'd like to, now it's a great thing that we do have a full committee, and there are three gentlemen on Zoom. So I'd like to introduce David Goldberg, if you'd raise your hand so the folks watching could see. Mitchell Packler and Peter Weiner. Thank you all for joining the committee. As I said, we have a full committee, and that's great. And we have a really good cross-section of expertise here. So I think we could all be a great help to the town, in addition to the members who are presently on the board. Thank you.
Chairperson Stern, I do want to call the roll for the public who is watching, so they'll know who's here.
Yes, please call the roll.
Okay. Member Packler. Member Weiner. Member Riami. Okay. Member Greenwald.
Physically present.
Chairperson Stern.
Physically present.
Member Goldberg and Member Stump is not here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Matt to give a presentation on the budget. Those of you who saw it on the commission meeting, there'll be a lot of similarity, and I think there may be one or two updates as well.
Okay, as Matt gets queued up here again, Marshall Abity, Town Manager. I apologize, had to come in a little bit late trying to get some clarification on our workshop. But as Matt goes into the budget presentation, I want to make the same statement to the Financial Advisory Board that I made to Town Commission and to the general public. I'm very proud of this budget. We worked hard as a group, myself along with Matt and the department heads, to pull together a budget that again represents our strong fiscal health, that remains strategically focused on our long-term goals to make for a successful community. And we did this even with COVID-19 pandemic impacts and lower than expected property growth values. And we remained positioned to protect and enhance our unique sense of place, which you'll again see as a theme throughout the budget book that will be produced through this year. Again, our fiscal discipline and our commitment to our values allows us to present a balanced budget that maintains our current level of services. This is highlighted by a slight millage decrease we'll see. Yes, we said that. You'll receive a letter from the mayor that also outlines that this week, a slight millage decrease. So we're proud of that. Programming of funds to create the first steps in the Highland Beach Fire Rescue Department. So we programmed the necessary dollars to get that off the ground and moving forward. A series of capital improvements to the sanitary sewer, water treatment plant, and police technology, recognizing the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. We should be getting about $800,000 in this fiscal cycle to help subsidize some of those programs and get those off the ground. And we had no material impact to reserves. So our financial positions, our reserve position, our cash flow, free cash, will be unchanged by this. So we are in a great, again, fiscal position. The town should be quite proud of itself that we are in a strong position to, again, move forward and be able to really start tackling the fire rescue department creation. So with that, I will turn that over to Matt to jump into the presentation.
Matt, one logistical question, if I may.
Sure.
Since we cannot see the other three members on the Zoom, who has that screen to recognize if anybody has a question? Oh, you got them, I couldn't see.
Yeah.
Okay, got it in the corner now. Okay, great. So Matt, if somebody has a question during the presentation, if you see a raise of their hand, please recognize them. Thank you.
Certainly. As Marshall said, I'm going to start with a bit of an overview of the budget. As Marshall said, we have a slight reduction in the overall millage rate as a result of the planned reduction in debt service and associated with the water rate transition plan. The net figure is a decrease. We have additional property taxes of about $275,000 that come from growth in our tax roll. That is offset by the reduction in debt service millage. Go through that a little more detail on the next slide. We're making up a bit of a budget gap with use of reserves in the general fund. It is really just a pledged use of reserves. If you look at the amount being proposed, 593,000, it is less than the increase from the fire rescue budget for fiscal year 22. As Marshall said, we're also taking care of a number of capital projects. We're using the federal grant dollars to take care of projects in water and sewer. We are seeing some increased collections in discretionary sales tax, which is allowing us to accelerate a few projects that would have been in future fiscal years. As I mentioned, the reduction in the millage rate for debt service of 0.1653 mils. It's a reduction of about just short of 30% reduction in millage. And as you see in the box at the bottom, we had growth in taxes from just growth in the taxable value within the town. That is offset by the reduction in the millage, leading to a net change in our ad valorem revenue of about 115,000.
How much is the debt outstanding? And what's the average maturity of that debt?
We have outstanding, I'm going off the top of my head, I would say roughly about $12 million, $13 million. A good portion of that debt matures within the next 5 years. Most of the loans taken out for the water plant, and that's all the debt is related to the water plant. That debt, and for the most part, was taken out in 2007, 2008, and were 20-year loans. So they've got, most of it about 5-6 years left on that. There is a large loan which matures in about 4 years as well. One of the most recent loans, I believe, was in 2017, and that would obviously carry out till about 2037. But that is not the largest portion of the outstanding debt.
If I may ask, what is the highest interest rate we pay on any of those loans?
That's also going off the top of my head. I want to say about 3% is about the highest. The bulk of it is at between about 1.6 and 1.8%.
Thank you.
Most of those loans, with the exception of one, we have 5 individual loans. 4 of them are from the State Department of Environmental Protection has a revolving loan fund, subsidized loans for specifically for water infrastructure. And that's what the bulk of the outstanding debt is, those types of loans. Moving forward, we have an increase in the taxable value of about 3.3% over fiscal year 21. We've had, as you see over that 12-year period, an average change of about 3% for the past 12 years. So we are just slightly over what our historical change in value has been over the past 12 years.
Matt, is that a revised number from the presentation?
That reflects the updated number of July 1st provided by the property appraiser's office.
And is that pretty much the final? Or
That is final. We're not going to get, this is the millage rate that the commission will use to accept the not to exceed millage rate for upcoming fiscal year. This is the final number. We will not see another number in terms of a change from the property appraiser until after they go through the value adjustment board process, and then there would be a final figure for fiscal year 22. That would probably come May or June of 2022. So it's about a year off to even see what that final. As previously mentioned, we have a slight reduction in the millage rate. You see in that orange portion where it went down a bit. We kept the operating millage the same to reflect the needs that we have to fund the first stages of the implementation of the fire department, and holding it steady raised an additional $275,000 in additional revenue. With the change in debt service millage, that reduces in comparison to other surrounding, or to the other lowest, or other, I should say, other similar communities. You'll see that we were the 4th lowest millage in fiscal year 21. The proposed millage rate for fiscal year 22 would put the town as the 3rd lowest millage within Palm Beach County. Yes.
This really doesn't affect us, but out of curiosity, Manalapan, I believe, uses Palm Beach County Fire Rescue.
Correct.
So how do they keep their overall millage rates
They
at this level? I thought that they charged 3.4 mils or something.
So under the previous administration at the county and the previous fire chief, they went out on an action process of expanding the fire service department, I would say about 10 to 15 years ago. And a series of communities got what they called some sweetheart deals to expand their districts. So Manalapan and South Palm Beach kind of share a department, and they got a lesser than the MSTU structure as the deal that they got to maintain fire service rescue, similar to the Jupiter district. Instead of paying the 3.458, they pay 1.7 something. So they, the county during an expansion period was going out and moving off of their MSTU and looking at other means to expand the district. And some of us communities are saying that to the county, that if you truly want a metro district, you can't hold on to the MSTU, because if you look at our tax rate, that would double our tax structure to go to a Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. So if they really are interested, as they say they are, they really have to change their philosophy of addressing it. But currently, the county administration likes to hold on to that MSTU. So I don't see the county expanding unless they change back to a similar, and that's how Manalapan has a contract for service. So I think they pay like 1.5 million for complete fire rescue services. So that's why their rates, they're able to keep theirs down so low.
Well, that explains it. I looked at their budget, saw who they were using, and it just didn't jive with what some of the information we'd gotten, but that explains it.
But if you look, what's interesting in this list, if you look at Juno Beach, they're at 5.466. Their operating millage is 2.0, but the other 3.466 is to address because they have to pay the full MSTU. So you can see how that affects smaller communities on their tax structure.
Moving on, you see that the reduction in millage rate leads to a reduction in taxes. And for a condo assessed at $500,000, they would see a reduction of about $83 in their tax bill come November.
Can I ask a question back on the Manalapan? How long is that sweetheart deal going to last?
I think they're in a current, Mr. Kellogg up there sent me a copy of the South Palm Beach contract. I think they're in about year 3 of a 10-year arrangement currently. So they have a ways to go. And I don't know if in time the county would move from that. But the way their contract is written, it's MSTU is in there, but it is the cap, and they charge for direct cost of service to provide this, the fire rescue. So you can see that it's dramatically less than the MSTU to provide the service to a small community, which is what we contend would be they could use as their rationalization of why the MSTU doesn't work for the next tier of communities in the county if they really want to move to that model. But they have about 7 years, I think, left on that. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, continuing on. The tax rate that would be set by the town commission only represents a portion of the property taxes that our residents pay. They also pay to Palm Beach County Schools, and you see the millage rate there from fiscal year 21 to Palm Beach County itself and to a number of special districts, including the Health District, the Florida Inland Navigational District, I mentioned healthcare, the Children's Services Board, but that's not the major portion. A quarter of roughly a quarter of the property taxes paid by town residents is to the town. Here you see a summary of the general fund revenues. As I mentioned before, you see a net reduction in current property taxes, current ad valorem taxes at the very top. Also important to point out that significant reduction on interest on investments for fiscal year 22. Those changes are offset by pretty substantial increase in franchise fees that we expect to receive. And also down near the bottom, you'll see an increase of $335,000 in the administrative reimbursements that the town is extracting from the water and sewer funds and the building fund to help support the administrative services that they receive from the general fund.
Matt, one question. I was going to hold it for the second part, but since it's relative to this, as far as the investment interest and so forth, I believe most of the money is in money market funds, BlackRock and so forth.
Correct.
Is there any opportunity for short-term laddering of CDs to get an additional amount of interest? Because we're getting almost nothing.
CDs are a bad investment.
Yeah.
That's my specialty. I'm an investment guy. That's why I ask those questions.
Oh, okay.
We'll cover that more thoroughly. I'm not sure CDs would be a good alternative versus.
It's a horrible alternative.
Okay.
Horrible.
But we'll cover that a little further when I get into it.
I have one question about property taxes.
Sure.
Why do you have a decrease from 21 to 22 when property valuations are going up dramatically?
Because that reflects a combination of two things. It's not just the operating millage.
Yeah.
So I sort of mentioned before here. It's not just the operating millage. You see on our operating millage, we're gaining 275,000 if you look at the orange box at the bottom.
Yeah.
But we made a conscious decision to shift from supporting our water fund with ad valorem taxes that support the debt to shifting it to water rate structure.
Yeah.
And that is the first step in a 5-year plan to shift from ad valorem taxes supporting that debt service to having it supported fully by the water fund.
Now, have we looked at refinancing the debt since we're at historical low interest rates?
Yes, we have one loan,
Yeah,
fortunately, that was structured in such a way that it does not allow us to do a refinancing. The others are at such low interest rates, and there is so few years left on some of these loans that we really can't get any economic advantage once you subtract away the issuance costs associated with restructuring that debt.
but you could buy back the debt in the open market and then refinance it at a cheaper rate.
Yeah, you could, but you're going to incur some pretty substantial issuance costs with bond counsel, financial advisor, and just bank counsel, that kind of thing. That is going to significantly impact the economics associated because there isn't enough time left on these loans to really take advantage of the reduction in interest rates, which we would experience. So much of the loans at this point are principal versus interest.
Okay.
Matt,
So, yes.
just to point out, I find it intriguing, and it probably says something about our town, that the combination of revenues from court fines, miscellaneous police income, and violation of local ordinances is less than the money that the library is projected to bring in for library fines.
Wait.
That's meant more in jest than anything else, but
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Well, I think we're going to say that rebalancing to be more equitable amongst them, but again, it's never going to be a big, our residents pretty much comply with everything. I mean, we really don't really chase our own residents around that much, and a handful of speeding tickets and the like, so.
I'm not being critical. I
Okay.
just found it interesting. And the numbers are so small, it makes
Yeah,
no
it's
difference in the
very
total
small.
budget, but I just thought it was an interesting observation.
Yeah, it's not something that's going to move the needle, so to speak.
And question if I can, this is Dave Goldberg. I joined a few minutes late. Has there been any revenue from film or movies in the previous years?
Films or movies, not directly to the town, no.
Not in our tenure. I believe there was some type of filming that was done maybe in 16, but I don't know that any dollars really were generated from it.
Okay.
Here you see graphic depiction of the revenues for the general fund. As you can see, the largest portion obviously is property taxes, generating about 73% of the revenue. Here is a summary of general fund expenditures. The big numbers to point out is fire rescue costs going up $622,000. We have a increase also of about $270,000 for the police department. And you'll see down near the bottom a substantial reduction in interfund transfers. And what that is the reduction in debt service dollars being transferred from the general fund to the water fund as a result of the change, which I mentioned earlier, to support water fund debt with water rates as opposed to ad valorem taxes. Here's a visual depiction of general fund expenditures, you can clearly see that the bulk, 63%, is attributable to public safety, with fire rescue at 41% and the police department at 22% fund. Here's a breakdown of general fund expenditures by category of personal services, operating expenses, and capital. As I mentioned before, a substantial reduction in the transfers going out of the general fund related to the reduction in the debt service millage. And as Marshall mentioned, the town is in outstanding financial position. The blue portion of that line, stacked bar for the general fund balance in 2020, basically remaining the same. That represents, I'll show you here, about 52.7% of general fund expenditures and transfers out. That is very far and away where rating agencies would expect a AAA rated municipality to be at. Most AAA rated municipalities probably have a unassigned fund balance of maybe around 30%. Even after we use nearly 600,000 of reserves in the proposed 22 budget to cover the costs of fire rescue service implementation, we're still looking at going from about 52.7 to around 47% of expenditures and transfers out for the unassigned fund balance. And that unassigned fund balance is important because it really represents the degree of financial flexibility for the town and the ability to absorb unexpected impacts, whether they be on the expenditure side or the revenue side. Next is a summary of the Building Special Revenue Fund. Beginning in fiscal year 20, we established a new fund to comply with state law and record building permit revenue, and it is restricted in its use for building department operations. Important to point out that this will fund an addition of an additional part-time permit technician position in fiscal year 22. Moving on, the discretionary sales surtax special revenue fund. Let me back up a little bit. The town budget is divided into several different funds. The general fund, which supports the bulk of operations, it's most of the operations. There is the building department fund, which obviously reflects the operations of the building department. The discretionary sales surtax special revenue fund, which reflects the money that is shared between municipalities, the county, and the school board on the 1 penny sales surtax. And this reflects the town's portion and our use of it on capital projects that would qualify. Somebody have a question? Okay. And then we also have 2 enterprise funds, the water enterprise fund and the sewer enterprise fund. So the town's budget is split up into those 5 different funds. For the discretionary sales surtax fund, as I mentioned, we're seeing now some recovery in the sales tax revenue being received. We were rather conservative in our estimate, both on terms of anticipated collections, because they're just starting now. We're just starting now to see it in the past several months, whereas it was down substantially in both fiscal year 20 and the beginning half of fiscal year 21, current year. We didn't want to get too aggressive in forecasting growth until we see exactly what type of post-pandemic economy we end up with. But that increase in collections is allowing us to make some additional mid-year additions. The town in the current year funded a new roof for town hall and the continuation of the crosswalks projects. The additional collections and additional fund balance dollars within this special revenue fund allowed us to make a mid-year addition of a police vehicle, the overhead lighting for the crosswalks project, and a lighting improvement project within town hall.
Excuse me, could you just take a second to explain the sales tax fund, whether is that, how is that determined? Is it a gross sales tax, net sale? How is it, how do we get the percentage and how is that?
Well,
Computer.
it was approved by countywide referendum a number of years ago. I want to say 2017, I believe, and implemented at the start of 18. And it provides for one additional penny above the state sales tax rate of 6%. So they're now 7%. That one penny is distributed, I want to say 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 between municipalities, the school board, and the county. So this would reflect our portion, and it's distributed based on population. So we get, this is our little slice of what is distributed amongst the 39 municipalities within Palm Beach County.
And it's computed based upon retail sales, internet sales, anything that comes into the county is the gross amount?
Yes, it is all sales within the county, but then distributed on the basis of population. It's not, obviously, if it was point of sale, we'd get a big goose egg because we obviously don't have any retail within the town. But it is based on population. So here's a summary of the Water Enterprise Fund. Probably most significant change to point out is the recognition of federal grant dollars associated with COVID relief. They are restricted for use in infrastructure. They were primarily and strongly suggesting water and sewer infrastructure, which is exactly what the town needs and reflects one of our greatest capital needs within the town. We are using of that roughly $800,000 that was mentioned earlier. We're using about $234,000 on the water side. I should point out that you will have seen that the town in the fiscal 21 budget had use of net position $570,539. That was basically, net position is how we refer to reserves within an enterprise fund. And you'll see that that is plugged in at 570,000 basically to fund capital. In fiscal year 20, the town had pledged $629,500, but used none of it. It was all pledged to balance the budget, but it was not used at all. And in fact, we had excess revenue in fiscal year 20 of about 287,000, which added to net position reserves within the Water Enterprise Fund. You'll also see a substantial reduction in the transfer from the general fund, which reflects the reduction in the debt service millage. Moving on to the Sewer Enterprise Fund. Big change here, as mentioned in with regards to the Water Enterprise Fund, there is $565,000 in federal grant dollars being used to fund capital projects. You'll see that there is no net position reserves being pledged as part of the fiscal year 22 budget, and it had previously been 734,000 in current year 21. In spite of the recently implemented changes to the town's water and sewer rates, if you look at the arrows at the bottom, they highlight where the town's rates are for water and sewer in comparison to other jurisdictions in not just Palm Beach County, but a few in Broward as well. And you'll see that the town currently, that left arrow represents the rates that were approved by the commission that went into effect as of April 1st. And you can see that we're substantially below the average of those jurisdictions included. And you see that that second arrow on the right shows where rates will be based on the projected rate increases over the next 3 fiscal years. We will just be over that current average. And I should note that it is very likely that all of these jurisdictions will have rate increases over that period. And we are very likely to be back to sort of the middle of the pack in terms of water and sewer rates in comparison to these jurisdictions, even after the sizable increases which are planned over the next several years to reduce that debt service.
Matt,
Yes.
could you comment on our contract for wastewater with Delray in terms of its duration and any possible escalators that are in that contract?
I believe it has.
It's a CPI.
evergreen- It's a CPI based increase. It's averaged probably about 3% roughly over the last few years, 3% each year. That is, I believe, an evergreen type of contract. Unless one of us decides to get out, it sort of continues on. We don't have a great number of alternatives versus the city of Delray when it comes to wastewater. We don't have the space to do it ourselves, and I'm not sure that town residents would really want a wastewater plant located within town, even if we had the space.
No, I recognize the potential lack of alternatives. That's why I asked the question about potential risks. But you're saying that it has nothing to do with their actual costs. It's just our rate is related to just the CPI.
Well, it's 30-year section, so it goes every 30 years, and then it's like an automatic renewal after 30, and they haven't changed it much. And when they initially created the initial number, it was based on the cost of whatever to move it through and how much they pay to the Southeast County treatment facility, which I think is in Boynton. So basically, they just kind of let us pass through their pipes, if you will.
So basically, it's a long-term contract and a CPI, and there's minimal risk of change from our end.
Yes.
Thanks.
Going on here, you see the unrestricted net position of our water and sewer funds is slight reduction on the water side, and that just is reflective of some pretty significant capital spending on the water fund. You see a slight increase on the sewer side. And one of the things that's obviously going to help there going forward is all those federal grant dollars, which allows us to avoid raising rates any further than they already have been. The town is facing, based on a video examination of our sewer lines, repair costs of roughly $1 million over the next several years, just on the sewer side. This is a list of all the capital projects planned for fiscal year 22. You see some small capital projects for the building fund. You'll see one project that is split up amongst several different sources where we intend to add some UV protection to our AC ventilation systems in all of our buildings. But starting with town hall and moving on. There are costs here in the discretionary sales tax fund associated with office renovations within town hall needed for the implementation of the fire rescue department. There is also funding for north and south entry signs, funding for 2 police vehicles and a vehicle for the new fire rescue chief. We're investing in additional police technology in terms of body cameras and tasers, which are automatically activated. The body cameras are automatically activated anytime anybody pulls up to an accident scene or withdraws either their taser or their firearm. We have continuation of capital within our sewer fund. We are rehabbing lift station number 2. We pretty much take care of a lift station every year as part of our capital planning. Part of that is to raise those lift stations above existing water lines, reflecting rising sea levels. We are also replacing sewer lining, as I mentioned, the pipe rehabilitation project. On the water side, we have ongoing projects in terms of replacing chemical tanks, chemical pumping, a rehab of water well number 6, and you'll see also the UV protection for the water treatment plant air conditioning system. Is there any questions on any of the capital projects?
Just one quick question. Do you anticipate any need for capital improvement on the walkways? With some of the, is that just an expense where some of the edging and cracking and so forth?
I wouldn't suspect that we'd see a substantial amount, only because those are relatively new crosswalks, and the landings in terms of
I'm
the
not talking about
concrete.
the crosswalk, I'm talking about the path itself.
Oh, the path itself, probably not, only because that was a major project in fiscal year 2019, which was the resurfacing of the entire walkway.
I'm just suggesting it gets inspected to see if in fact there is a cost involved.
Okay.
I assume that the big money for fire will be 2023, 2024.
Yeah, I'll summarize it here at the end. We got a slide that sort of shows some of those costs that we expect to incur in fiscal 22. But as the commission was discussing the implementation of the fire rescue department, a lot of those costs will hit in 23, but we will start to see some of them hit next fiscal year. Do you want to go?
Yeah, on the fire side, we've programmed in about $500,000 plus or minus to take next fiscal year. That consulting firm, getting stuff ready for the referendum, bringing on the PR firm, our consultants, doing a fire chief search, selecting a fire chief, bringing them on board. So those are the big costs we see in the next fiscal year. You're right, though, in 23 and 24, those next two, we're going to see, besides like architectural design, we're going to have to put shovels in the ground, start doing the firehouse addition, start bringing in captains, administrative support, HR personnel. We're going to have to then start taking that next big step into managing and having our own fire department. So next year won't be as bad, but the year after that, we'll be making some sizable investments into that fire department, probably to the tune of, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million each of those 2 years before we go live.
I have a question. It's Mitchell Packler. Since I'm new to this could be very redundant, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's our responsibility to the Milanje Park project? Does that fall under any of our budgetary expenditures for the coming year?
No, we do not. We really, I thought that the commission over the last, say, year and a half have done a good job inserting themselves back to the negotiation tables to find a hopefully more palatable Milanje Park solution. But technically, the county can proceed without us in any fashion. So we really haven't budgeted for that. And
okay,
really,
I was just wondering.
yeah. So
Thank you.
I got a question with this fire department. Is there a pension involved? And is there a pension for all Highland Beach employees?
it's one of the advantages of us, or one of our bigger cost savings over what you'll see with these other departments around us, is we are in the Florida retirement system, the FRS,
Yep.
and contribution percentages are significantly less than these independent pension funds that you would see in Delray, Boca, West Palm Beach. They have sizable contribution catch-ups, if you will, for their problems with assumption rates. So we know what our known payments are on a year-to-year basis for our safety risk category of employees, which is generally about half of what these other towns have to contribute to their pension funds.
We have seen over the past several years pretty substantial increases in the Delray Beach contract costs that come as a result of pensions. They're playing catch up to
Yep.
get their funds, to get their pension funds adequately funded, and they're passing that, a portion of that on to the town to represent the firefighters that work out of our fire station.
Right. So what's the contribution rate from the town to the pension plan that we invest in?
The pension plan that we're moving to, the Florida
Yeah.
retirement system, the firefighters would fall into what is called the special risk category, which has a contribution rate of roughly 25% of their salaries.
So the question I have, the reason I brought it up that way is for the new fire department, maybe we could take this offline, but pensions are my specialty. Are we going to hire a relatively young team to keep the pension costs relatively low? Because it will escalate and go a lot higher if you hire a lot of seasoned veterans.
I think we'll see, anecdotally, I think we're going to see a younger force, but we don't want entirely a young force, because we're going to want some that are seasoned veterans to kind of bring on the new folks and somebody that knows how to do these things. So I think collectively as a pool, as our fire department of say 24 to 25 employees, they'll be probably a little bit younger as far as seniority as to the surrounding jurisdictions. But over time, I think we'll catch up and see, we'll kind of get to that more tenured staff over a 10-year period. But we do recognize some of that in the early years of our implementation.
And if you take some of the Delray Fire Department personnel, there has to be a risk transfer to that new pension. Have you guys looked into that?
We have that marked as something that we do have to take a look at as to how and if we can do that. but we have not crossed that bridge. Again, the county and many fire departments, I don't want to say all fire departments, but many fire departments are on the FRS system, so they could do those lateral movements and carry their pension with them and years of service with them. So that provides some value to us staying in the FRS system. Now, Delray folks, I think that's something we may have to explore if there's a group or an interest of individuals that want to come over and they're leaving something. But I think you're going to find more tenured firefighters are going to be unwilling to leave Delray or a Boca that has their own fund in place, pension fund, because they're so well invested in it. But the other agencies will probably see more of that lateral and transfer, but unless they, retire completely from them and want to come over.
A firefighter who is currently working for Delray Beach cannot transfer their service credit time to the Florida retirement system. Cannot do it. So,
Good.
so that's going to limit, as Marshall said, the number of firefighters who are currently working for Delray Beach would be interested in coming to the town department, which would be participating in the Florida retirement system. On the other hand, whereas it's a sort of a disincentive for existing Delray Beach firefighters to come and join the town's new department, it is an incentive for firefighters who work for Palm Beach County Fire Department, whereas their service time would be entirely 100% transferable to the retirement system that the town is participating in. If there's no other questions, we'll just sort of let Marshall summarize where we stand.
I just had one additional question, if I can. Fees related to sand dredging at the beach, when those occur, who pays for those?
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
In previous years, I think in South Boca, I've seen the cranes off the beach blowing sand onto the beach. When that happens, or if it happens in Highland Beach, who pays those fees? Is it the town?
I'll start with the prior and then work my way to the latter. So with the beach nourishment projects that you see in Boca, that's the park and beach district of Boca pays those, and every resident pays a millage into that. I think of about 1.7 mils or 2.1 mils. I should know that because I live there, but we pay about 2 mils that go into the fund. Whatever the cost for dredging is carried by the district, and it is subsidized traditionally by the state and the Army Corps of Engineers to maintain the beach structure. So usually when you see a beach nourishment project, it's a three-way match. Local, state, and federal come together and pay for that. If Highland Beach gets to the point where residents seek to do that, it will be a little bit more challenged because all of our beach is private. So there may be federal dollars, but and maybe state dollars, but the local, I would even say the federal would be limited too, because there isn't public access that kind of drives the whole need to support it. Now, God forbid we have a hurricane that destroys our beach. There may be FEMA dollars that we could do to restore the beach back to a pre-existing condition. I believe they had that situation happen in Fire Island in New York, where a hurricane came through, ripped apart Fire Island, and the feds put the money in, recognizing the value of that barrier island to the inland waters and inland land structure. So there are opportunities, but it's kind of difficult for us to do a wholesale beach business. We don't have public beaches and any.
I thought you might find out. No?
Question.
Yeah.
I think that's my answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
That is more or less our presentation, the budget, unless anybody has any additional questions.
Before we go into the your next piece, I want to thank you for very well prepared and presentation and answering all the questions. Thank you.
We don't actually have an agenda, but I guess one of the other things to talk about is the monthly financial report, which got distributed. I'm sorry for the late distribution. Got distributed for the month of June. As indicated here, we're in continued good financial shape. Most revenues are coming in as expected. We're seeing a little bit of recovery, as I mentioned, in the sales tax and state revenue sharing. We had reduced those substantially in part of the fiscal 21 budget, but we're starting to see some bounce back. The only general fund expenditure to point out is in our non-departmental other general government category, where we're just slightly ahead of our 75% target of spending. With regards to the fund balance within the general fund, we're expecting it to remain roughly the same in spite of, I should say, the same with regards to the unassigned portion. There was a new assigned revenue cost associated with the $110,000 received from the city of Delray Beach as part of the true-up process underneath the contract. We also had increases in the assigned reserves for budget stabilization, which is based on basically 2 months worth of operating expenses for the general fund, and an increase in the disaster recovery fund balance to reflect 1/12 of the general fund budget. That is the targeted amount.
Are the balances reinvested daily?
Well, we have, let's sort of go to the investments. The town has 3 primary investments. We have participate in a treasury money market funds at BlackRock and Fidelity Investments. We also participate in the state of Florida local government investment pool. That is money which we send up and sort of take out as we need it. The BlackRock and Fidelity investments are pretty stable. We don't tend to touch them or use them for any cash flow purposes.
And how much is in there?
In the BlackRock has about 8.6 million. Fidelity has just under 3.2.
Are those in institutional share classes?
Yes.
And how are those decisions made to go into those 2 funds?
Well, that was a decision made, I would say roughly 1.5 years ago by one of the members, recommendation of one of the members of the Financial Advisory Board. Went on to become the vice mayor and has since left office, Greg Bobby.
Because Fidelity is not a low-cost provider, just so you know. You can enhance those returns by going to other providers of equal stability. And what happens if I taught someone in the office how to do it themselves so they can eliminate any management fees associated with it? And it's just by making a phone call on a daily basis or on a term basis.
Well, we don't really actively invest those funds are sort of set within that money market and sort of left there to accrue. There's not there's no active real investment in those in terms of actively managing those funds. The other thing to point out is that the pooled cash of the town is sort of interest earnings are distributed based on pooled cash. We take all the cash from 5 funds that I had mentioned earlier, general fund, special revenue funds, and the enterprise funds, put it all together in this portfolio and then distribute the interest earnings based on the proportion that each of those funds make up of the portfolio in terms of the equity in pooled cash that each of those funds provide. Most of the money is in these 3 investments. There is some which we need for cash flow purposes that we keep in with our bank, where that is split between a reserve fund and an operating fund, which is basically the operating fund is the checking account, and the reserve fund, for lack of a better phrase, is sort of a savings account. And that is just for cash flow cushion and operating needs.
Well, you're getting paid close to zero on that money,
On which money?
on the money kept on at the bank level.
Yes.
When money market funds are daily funds anyways. Not going to overdraw them because the money comes back every day. If the town doesn't want to save money, that's fine, but there's an option out there to save several $1,000s over a year period.
Well, I should point out that state law requires that we follow an investment strategy, which is known by the acronym of SLI, which is safety, liquidity, and then yield. So the primary objective is safety of our funds. In terms of and maintaining liquidity so that we pay our bills as they come due. Yield is the last of the objectives as required by state law. So there are some other alternatives, but public funds, we tend to be reverse. But we do not have an investment advisor within the town. We do not pay manage our funds in that manner. If there's no other real questions, I don't really have much else to say about the monthly financial.
Thank you. I'd just like to bounce back to one other quick question on the budget, if I may.
Sure.
The Financial Advisory Board had recommended salary increases for the commissioners and mayor. And I understand that ran into some question based upon the charter. Has that money been budgeted for next year or on hold, or what's the status?
It's on, we did not budget for the increase
You did not.
because we can't. Maybe Dr. Greenwald wants to weigh in. He's been heavily in on the conversation.
Yeah, there's issues as it relates to the charter, and the charter review group is looking at it, and then it'll go and may need to be included in the referendum.
No, okay. I understand. I've been watching the meetings. I just, that question is whether it's a budgetary question that I'm really
Right.
asking,
No, I
whether it's
understand.
in the budget.
I think it probably, again, the total amount that we're talking about, even if it went through, would be what, $25,000 or
Okay, just-
something?
We, we would, if there's decision made to make a change, we can certainly have the financial flexibility within the
I just wanted
budget too.
clarity whether it was in the number or not.
It's not in at this point.
Okay, this being a workshop, is there anything else that anybody else wants to bring up or any question at this point? We got a pretty captive audience here. If anybody has anything.
I wanted to ask Matt one, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Riami, you're up.
Yeah, on the issue of the commission salaries, a big question that we're talking about on the other board is about the authority for the commissioners to approve their own salary increase. What does anyone know what the other towns, what their policies are with respect to that issue?
I can comment on just by watching the meetings for that committee, and there are various things. There's one, for example, that a commission can vote an increase, but for the following, not for themselves, but for the replacement or the next commissioner to come on board. There are various approaches to that, and that's what I guess they're talking about at this point. You want to add anything
Right.
to that?
I think that's correct. There's a various series of options. I think the Charter Review Committee or Board is looking towards if the commission doesn't, it doesn't go into effect until the next term. So that wouldn't go into effect, or it would require a type of voter approval. So I think that was still kind of final discussion next Monday, right? Monday?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm part of that, obviously, but I'm talking about, I didn't remember that was discussed in terms of what other towns do.
Yeah, we had looked up, and as Marshall said, it's variable from town to town. So in some places, the commission can just do whatever they want, much like Congress, I guess.
Right.
But in some, it was written such that you sort of couldn't vote for your own, at least during that term, so that you would have to face the voters before you could get an increase in your salary.
Yeah.
Now, the review board was just looking at different alternatives, and no decisions had been made in terms of what to recommend.
Right.
And once again, that committee will make their recommendations to the commission. The commission can change the recommendations for the final proposal.
Yeah, and then whatever comes out of that has to go to the public at a general referendum for approval.
Right.
Yeah, I just had, sort of goes along the same line as questions that you got from the commissioners. Water and sewer, it would be good, I know it's too early, but as it becomes clear whether the new rates that were put into effect are going to come close to meeting the projections in the budget, that would be good, because that was a fairly significant change in methodology in calculating rates. And particularly on the sewer side, where we went basically from a flat tax to a water use volume related system. So just so that we don't get too far behind, basically,
No,
that we know
the
what-
commission
what's
has
doing.
asked us to provide, we are just now, this past several weeks, issuing the first bills underneath that new rate structure. And as we get the collections in over the next several weeks here, we will report back. The commission specifically asked for a report every 2 months after every billing cycle to sort of see whether or not we are on track. And we will do it each month and then do a summary for the year as well, obviously as part of the budget process. But as you said, it's very early on. We're just now getting the first billing cycle.
Anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Hearing none, I will adjourn this workshop at 3:17.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joining everybody.